Well, hello, my wonderful office workplace warriors, and welcome back to another episode of Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart, the unfiltered truth you wish they taught in management school or any school for that matter. We're starting to go back to school around here in Oklahoma, and I just think of all the stuff that I wish I'd learned when I went to school. And today is no different because I have a guest on the podcast. Yay, I'm super excited. I love having guests on the podcast because it makes these conversations so much more fun and insightful. And today is no different because I have Nina Ness. Oh gosh, we worked on this. Nesdoly. Nesdoly? Did I say it
Yes,
right?
Dolly.
Nesdoly, yay! She is a speaker and researcher and expert on neuroscience of work-life balance. Yes, believe it or not, there's a science behind this. Stress and burnout prevention. She leverages her background in neuroscience. She has a bachelor's in it and management, where she has a master's. She helps people and organizations build better work-life balance and build. Whoops, Nina is currently pursuing her PhD. Well, she a smarty. Um, Study work related stress. In her TEDx talk, go watch it. It's fantastic. How to Relieve Stress When You're Overwhelmed was selected as an editor's pick by TED. Welcome to the show.
Thanks,
Woo!
Dawn. I'm so
Applause.
excited to be here with you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So fascinating line of work. So, okay. I have to ask because my child is majoring in biology. She wants to be a doctor. But what made you like really kind of want to get into neuroscience? It's very fascinating.
Neuroscience was a big surprise to me too, actually. I started my bachelor's in cognitive science, which is kind of an interdisciplinary field. It was linguistics, philosophy, computer science. And I was sitting in the dentist's office one day, flipping through an issue of Maclean's magazine, and there was this article about neuroscientists doing research on hockey players to improve their performance. And I was like, well, that sounds amazing. So I went and signed myself up for an elective in neuroscience. Absolutely loved it. Loved it a lot more than linguistics. No shade to any linguists out there, but that was not my cup of tea. And decided neuroscience was for me and went through the process of actually going back to high school over the summer after my second year of university so that I could complete the courses I needed to qualify to then go into a neuroscience program.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's crazy. So all about the brain. And then kind of a shift there. And then you went into management because you're like, listen, there's something crazy about these managers. She's nodding her head. She's like, yes.
Again, it was interestingly, it started with taking the right elective. So if anybody is listening here who happens to be a student or who has a child who's going through the process, take some funky, unexpected electives because you can really just find your thing that way. And sometimes you find out what's not your thing, which is equally as useful. I remember taking an elective in criminology and I was like, nope, never doing that again. But I also we took a lot of psych electives in neuroscience. So one of the electives that I took was organizational psychology. I loved it. Same as when I first took my neuroscience elective and was like, I got to do this. I had the same reaction to organizational psychology. And at the time, I was working for Apple. So it was like I would be in class, I would learn these principles of organizational psychology. I would go to work and I would be like, oh my God, it's happening in front of me. That's so cool. So I decided I wanted to pursue my master's in management to look more at human behavior at work. And I was encouraged by my supervisors to take advantage of my background and training in neuroscience, which had a huge focus on stress and mental health, and look into how that applied to the workplace. And what I quickly saw was that neuroscience and management weren't really being used together very much. These
Mm.
streams of research, especially on stress and mental health at work, were progressing, both moving forward, but progressing separately. Like there wasn't a lot of overlap. So that's really where I see my role as a researcher and also now as a speaker, entrepreneur, and working with organizations is to take the best of both worlds from neuroscience and management and bring it together to understand how we can work in healthier, more brain friendly ways.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is fascinating because I think of people's workforces and, it's really, you just go to work. So a lot of times most people don't realize there's like an actual science behind the things that you do and the reasons that you behave. And so this is just incredibly fascinating. It's almost like, can you psychoanalyze my ex-boss? You just say, why did they act that way, kind of stuff. So I just laugh when I'm thinking, wow, you would have been really helpful just to have these conversations with either previous employees as an HR person. We kind of get called on to have our inner therapist, if you will, as HR professionals. And even as managers, we sometimes play the therapist. I used to have a manager that joked with me pretty regularly, you don't have a couch in your office, Dawn. And
For good reason.
yeah, you're right. I don't have a couch, but sometimes I feel like I do have that mental couch where people feel comfortable having conversations with me. Okay. You and I connected over burnout because I know it's so prevalent right now. And it seems to be, I hate saying this, but it seems to be like this catchphrase or that thing that's out there that people are like, oh, it's just, you're just hearing it's more prevalent. Why do you think that is?
It really came to the forefront during the pandemic. I think because people were struggling with their mental health in so many different ways during the pandemic, we saw a rise not only in burnout and stress, but also things like eating disorders and depression. Kind of any issue related to mental health that we have been experiencing before was amplified by this massive, uncontrollable global stressor. So everything came up. With burnout, though, it was interesting for me as someone who studies it because the narrative around burnout was that it was this new thing.
That's true.
I was wrapping up my master's thesis at the time, looking at how leadership impacts the way employees experience stress and subsequently their burnout levels. And there are 4 decades of research looking at burnout in the workplace as this occupational phenomenon from job stress that has not been successfully managed. So it came up in conversation there because I think people were just really struggling with their mental health during the pandemic. So now what we're seeing is this greater awareness of the relationship between work and mental health. But burnout has always been around, or sorry, it's been around for a while and we've been studying it for a while, which the
Yeah.
good news is that means we do understand a lot about it and there are solutions available. So, I'm often working with teams and organizations who are like, oh, like this burnout problem just came out of nowhere. Like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I got great news for you. We have 4 decades of really good research on this. We do have solutions and things that we can do to address it.
That's crazy. 4 decades. 4 decades, y'all. This isn't just like, oh my gosh, that COVID happened in 4 years ago. Now we're expressed all this burnout. This is a lot of research and a lot of time that's gone into this. So if you think back 40 years, I've been in the workforce 35 years roughly. And so if I think about that, every decade I've been in the workforce, there's been this kind of connection to burnout. And those of you that are familiar with SHRM, their employee mental health research in 2024 released for Mental Health Awareness Month. For those of you that didn't know, there was actually a mental health awareness month, found that 44% of 1,400 surveyed US employees feel burned out. That's crazy if I look at that. And then 45% feel emotionally drained from their work. And then 51% feel used up at the end of the workday. Like that's just in 2024. So I'm
And there's
wondering, like,
Yeah,
is
there's
it
another.
increasing?
It's hard to say because it's not the easiest thing to get a clear measurement on. So there's
Yeah.
another statistic from Deloitte that says that 77% of people will report feeling burnt out at some point during
Mm,
their career. The reason
God.
it's kind of hard to get a pin on, though, is because it is this really subjective experience and it's not a medical diagnosis. So,
Hmm.
for example, if people go on leave for burnout here in Canada and in most places in the US, it's not going to be recorded as burnout. It's going to be recorded as some kind of mental health leave. Now, some people will argue that, burnout should be a medical condition. However, the other argument is that keeping it labeled as an occupational phenomenon helps us to really focus on the role that organizations and leadership
Oh,
has in the experience people are going through, because it really is a workplace phenomenon. It has evolved. We do acknowledge now that, people are also dealing with other things in their lives, But this attribution to work helps us then look at how we can address problems at work to stop burnout from progressing and happening.
So, kind of an interesting shift on that. So, who are males or females? Is there a group like are males experiencing it more, or females experiencing burnout more, reporting it? I guess because that's a whole nother thing. Like men aren't generally going to stick up their hand. No offense to my gentlemen listeners out there, and be like, "I'm feeling burned out," whereas like a woman might. Like, is that kind of is that are you seeing more women, more men? Is it kind of a combination?
In my work with teams, I see a pretty even split. And when we look at the data, it tends to come back either a pretty even split, or women will sometimes be looking at higher levels of burnout, depending on what study and what source we've looked at. Have
That makes
not seen any situations where it's higher in men, though.
Yeah. And like I said, it's kind of like men tend to tamp down on that piece of it and aren't always one to stick up their hand and say, "Hey, I'm feeling this burnout." I also think, and again, a lot of times women carry the emotional burden of their household, and I think that plays into it. High stress, high, I get home from work and I have to do my other full-time job, which is cooking, cleaning, childcare, everything that goes into that. And I think that just perpetuates the problem. So when you come in and you work with an organization and they're calling you and they're like, we have a problem, what does that look like? Does someone call you to say, "Hey, come fix our burnout problem," or they call you because they're experiencing something that their employees are disengaged, or kind of how does that take place?
So typically, the teams that I hear from are kind of falling somewhere in the middle. Organizations that have a really serious burnout problem often don't want to talk to me. They know, like, they
I
know.
don't mean to laugh, but yes, they know.
And so sometimes I've had the initial meeting with them, and they're like, "All right, here's what we're doing." And I'm like, we don't even need to get in there and really work through this. You need to stop doing this. Like, this structural element has got to change. There was an organization I spoke to where they had people doing 35 client facing hours per week, and then also being expected to do charts and paperwork and additional projects. And I was like, there's no magic formula I can give you that's going to make 35 client hours per week plus other things with no space for breaks,
Yeah.
not
I'm like
burn
I'm
out.
like making this crazy face right now. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like in the standard in the US, obviously 40-hour work week is the standard. I couldn't imagine. So now it's like you stretch that work week to maybe 60, 70 hours. No wonder burnout's happening in that
Exactly.
organization.
So sometimes it's a quick call where I'm like, you know what? I really just think you got to deal with this structural thing. Call me later. Most of the time, it's organizations where leadership and HR are already doing things to improve employee mental health and well-being, and they've realized that they've hit their capacity in terms of their understanding of workplace mental health and creating a brain-friendly work environment. So I'll get the call in where they're saying, we're already doing a lot. Like, we are trying this, we're trying that. We're telling our people to take their vacation. We're telling our people to take their breaks. We're asking them to communicate with us about job expectations, and they're not. So we've got, a team that is stressed, exhausted, potentially complaining in surveys that they're struggling with their mental health, and a management and leadership teams that's saying, "Oh no, this is really important to us. And either we want to do something about it, or we've already been trying to do something about it, but we've kind of hit this point where we're not really sure where to go next." So when I go into organizations, it's typically to do a training program with the team where we'll go through several workshops based on what the organization is, what type of work they're doing. So, for example, it'll look pretty similar for an engineering firm and a anything out like a software development firm where they're at their desk, they're doing very brain heavy focused work, versus I've worked with police officers and first responders. There's going to be some differences there. Some of the fundamentals stay the same, but some of them are job specific strategies that we're working with. So we'll go through a training program over usually several months so that people are learning strategies to make their work more brain friendly, to construct their workdays in ways that are inherently less stressful to begin with, to relieve and manage stress that they do encounter, how to set boundaries, how to have conversations with each other. And it really helps get the entire team on the same page. And then when you do have those managers and HR leaders who have been saying, we want to support you. Now the team is like, okay, yeah, now I get it. We went through this program together. We've got some shared language. We're going to all participate. And it really helps to create a culture there where well-being is a priority, and that's established with really good science-backed strategy behind it.
It's interesting that you talk about HR and, managers or senior leaders that are really trying to promote that. And it's almost like I wonder if employees are scared to like go take their vacation or take those breaks because there might be consequences for that. So it's almost, you have to change that culture. And again, as a consultant myself, sometimes when you come in as a consultant, people listen more to a consultant than they do the managers or the senior leaders or even HR.
Oh yeah,
Guilty. I hear that all the time.
absolutely have HR people being like we'll be sitting in workshop, and for some of the more fundamental things like taking frequent breaks, they're like, this is what I've been saying. I'm like, yes, but now I'm here, so supporting you and your message. And it does help to show to like having me in to work with the team, I think helps communicate to employees that the HR and managers are serious about this, and it's not
Yes.
just lip service, especially because my approach is based on the neuroscience and management research. So we're really looking at how people are working. I don't think I have ever once gone in and said, sleep more, drink water. Like, those are the things people know they need to be doing. And if they're not doing them, it's because their current work life is making it hard to do those things. So we need to address the way that people are working, not just give people lists of like stand up every hour and drink your water and wear sunscreen. That's
Yeah.
like,
That's
no,
common sense,
no.
right? The common sense stuff. I almost
Yeah.
think, and I'm not a neuroscience and I don't pretend to be one, but I see a therapist on a regular basis and she talks about this where you are under such stress that you're focused or you're only reacting from the front part of your brain. And is that correct? It's like that whole fight or flight back part, the part where you can't think emotionally because you're like just trying to like not get killed by the bear.
Okay, I'll talk you through this.
Okay,
So
thank you. Like this
yeah.
is why I am not. This is why I talk to experts and I don't even pretend to be one.
So what she's probably referring to is a phenomenon called amygdala hijacking.
Yes.
And this is where your brain typically, when you are at rest, you're not in an immediate threat situation, your prefrontal cortex region right up here, if you put your hand over your forehead, it's right behind your skull there. Prefrontal cortex is what neuroscientists refer to as the CEO of the brain, the command center. It exerts control over everything else that's happening. When the prefrontal cortex is engaged, it's great for executive functions like thinking things through, making decisions, being very logical, doing math, all these kind of like big thinking activities. Your amygdala is your brain's threat detection center. It's kind of like a smoke detector for the brain, and it says when things are safe and when they're not, and when it, smells smoke, so to speak, it says, okay, panic, and initiates the stress response. When that happens, the amygdala kind of takes over that control function of the brain, because you're now in a state when you're in a really high threat state where you don't need to do math. Like, that's not an important function for your brain. So the amygdala is like, you know what we really need to do? We need to panic, we need to run, we need to fight the bear, whatever it is. So I'm going to take over for now. When you're in that state, then, because your amygdala has sort of hijacked the command center, so to speak, now it becomes more difficult to think things through and make really good decisions. I will say this is not the biggest state that most people deal with at work in terms of stress. You're not being chased by a bear
Thank
at
God.
work.
I mean,
Yeah,
maybe you're a
maybe.
forest ranger,
I don't know
maybe.
what your job is. So some people are like, Nina, I was chased by a bear on Tuesday. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm
For
just laughing.
most people,
Or maybe
though,
you feel like you're being chased by a bear.
where it really comes in our modern workday is, first of all, roles like first responders and medical professionals, they are dealing with that, high fight or flight response on the job. And so with organizations like that, I'm training them to respond effectively within those situations and to tap into their training when they're under stress. But for many people who are in office roles, that's going to come up when they feel a social threat,
Mm.
because our amygdala are very sensitive to feeling judged by other people. That's going to set off the feeling of a fight or flight response in the body. So that's why getting feedback can be so hard. Having a conversation with a coworker that just really goes off because you're feeling like I might get fired and it feels like a threat to your livelihood. That's not most of our day though. There's actually two stress response systems in your body. So that fight or flight pathway that we think of is very quick. And then there's another slower stress response system that's kind of this slow burn that is coming in when we're working really hard and just, responding to demands, having strain on ourselves. So what we're typically going through in the knowledge based workday, or if you do a lot of deeper focused work, is it's this slower stress that is accumulating throughout the day that's kind of building up on us versus this constant fight or flight in our day.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for not making me feel like an idiot. I appreciate that. No, but I totally, this is why I have smart people on my show, is because I'm very much like fascinated by this. Because if you think now, there could be times you might be working in a job where you're constantly getting that barrage. Like I think of a customer service rep who is, people don't pick up the phone to call and tell them what a fabulous job they're doing. And even for that matter, sometimes HR people, right? Like we could be, one minute we're okay. The next minute we have someone in our office crying, or it could be that manager that is dealing with high stress, constant productivity situation where they have to produce high numbers. So it's nice to see, or it's good to see, or it's great to understand this, that it could ebb and flow, or, quite honestly, you could be a policeman where you're in a situation like that. I think that's really a great take. I love the smoke detector analogy. I think that's a fabulous way to look at it. And the CEO of my own brain. In fact, when she was talking about that, I'm thinking, put in my head, those of you that are driving, make sure that you keep both hands on the wheels, but later you can put your hand on your head and realize that is the CEO of your brain. That's a great analogy. I love that. When you think burnout, because I think some people have different definitions of what burnout is, would you say is the most common definition, if you will, of burnout for the average human being? Because it's going to be a little bit different for everybody.
Yeah, the definition that I like to use comes from the World Health Organization. It is burnout as an occupational phenomenon resulting from chronic job stress that has not been successfully managed. And it has three dimensions. A dimension being something that you can experience one or all of the dimensions to varying degrees. Your first is emotional exhaustion, so feeling really run down, irritable, and easily frustrated, just perpetually fatigued. The second is cynicism or depersonalization. You start to withdraw from others and from your work, become very pessimistic and distrustful. And the third is reduced professional efficacy. Long word, reduced professional efficacy. So, efficacy refers to your belief in your ability to do something, in this case, your job. So, when you have reduced professional efficacy, you start to feel like you're failing at everything. This is where burnout becomes a really vicious loop for people. The sensation that they are not good enough and they're not doing enough will create this need to push harder and work more, when really it's time to back off and focus on taking care of yourself and doing less. But we have this sensation that we're not doing enough, and so push ourselves harder.
Oh, it's like that double-edged sword, right? It's, I suck at this, therefore I'm doing something wrong and I've got to try to figure out how to make it better. And I'm just going to pile more work on me. And it's just repeats itself over and over. And there's probably
Yeah.
people listening to this right now that are definitely shaking their heads. How, are there some good strategies or some ways to identify when you're feeling this? Cut it down and dirty. Obviously, if you are an HR professional or even a leader that is looking to utilize this service, I'm going to put Nina's connections information stuff in the show notes. So please feel free to reach out to her. This could benefit just about anybody on the planet. But, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, how do I even know if I'm burned out, or how am I identifying this? Are there some ways or tips that you can give to people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, you may just recognize the dimensions in yourself. Some people are listening to this right now and they're like, check, check, triple check. Oh no. Like some people are
Or they're
like,
pulled
I
over on the side of the road sobbing, or they're curled
yeah,
up under their
yeah,
desk.
exactly.
Yeah.
However, the other thing is that, especially for smart, high achieving, driven people, we've gotten incredibly good at overriding these signals. And a lot of it is also very normalized within our society. So going into work and saying, oh my God, I'm tired is such a normal thing. I personally am of the opinion if you are waking up tired every day, that's something's not right, whether that be burnout or there's some other health thing that you're dealing with. You should be waking up on a regular basis feeling good and excited about your day. When it comes to burnout, then, if you're not recognizing the dimensions within yourself, some other indicators are the statements and language that we start to use around our work. So, if you start finding yourself saying things or thinking things like, I feel like I'm getting worse at my job. Like, I suddenly feel like I'm failing. I've been doing this for years, but I feel like I'm getting worse. I don't know why people are trusting me with any work. This may be a sign of reduced professional efficacy. If you start finding yourself saying, I, yeah, I like to use the example of like me coming into an organization. Well, they hired this woman who's going to come in and talk about burnout prevention. So I think they're out to get us. Like
Oh,
if you see this distrust bubbling up, where even if someone tries to help you, you're feeling like that's potentially a threat to you. That's probably cynicism. If you are experiencing emotional exhaustion, you are going to find yourself saying things like, I just need to make it until the end of the quarter, next year, Friday,
Friday.
3 minutes from now, because you are just operating at capacity and it's so difficult to keep going. You will also see things like what I like to call that the moving finish line, like it's always moving away from you. You also will have this over urgent to-do list where it's like every day you're waking up and there are 18 things that are super urgent. That, if you're not burnt out already, is going to burn you out. Like that's too much. And finally, another really common one that I see is what I call superhuman expectations. It's when you're saying, I can do all of this as long as nothing goes wrong.
As long as
That's
the
not
car doesn't
realistic
break
to burn
down,
out.
as long as my employees don't call in sick, as long as, it's, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
as long as I don't need to sleep, as long as, my kid doesn't get sick, as long as everybody does exactly what they were supposed to do exactly on time, which
Never
when it's
happens. Yeah. I'm just like, who does that? That's like not realistic. I'm just gonna tell y'all. Oh my gosh. Well, this is fantastic. As we start wrapping up, what's one little tidbit that you'd like to leave with the listeners?
I think I'd like to share uh something solution based, something that listeners can
Perfect.
tap into to do, like a place to start with this. Preventing, dealing with burnout, and creating resilience is a really big project. There's a lot of factors that we can address in the organization, but one place that I love for people to start is with tapping into their restriction of rest. So
Hmm.
when you find yourself saying, oh, I have to finish this before I go for a walk, or oh, I gotta get this done before I can eat dinner with my family, or yeah, I'm gonna do this and then I can sleep. Those things you're denying yourself from, the walk, the food, the sleep, that is exactly what you need. That is your brain, your subconscious trying to break through our hustle culture narratives and say, that's what you need to be doing right now. And your brain is so amazing. It thrives on social connection, exercise, sleep, getting enough nutrients. So if you give yourself what you need, although in the moment it can feel like you're stopping, like you should be doing more work, you're going to find that when you tap into those things you've been restricting, and especially if you learn to make that a habit, that work is going to become so much easier because now you're giving your brain the things that it was asking for. So that's my one tidbit. With the next time you're sitting at your desk and you're like, okay, I just got to finish this before I can go for a walk, just go for a 10-minute walk. Like, you're not getting more done in the 10 minutes. You're going to get more done if you go outside for 10 minutes. You get the endorphins, the boost of a walk, and then you come back in, you're going to get so much more done. So tap into that little voice inside of you that's saying you can't rest. Say, I see that. I'm going to do exactly the thing I'm saying I can't do,
Yeah.
even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And a lot of times, this is funny. Somebody told me I went into her office and she's like, give me a couple of minutes. I got to get this finished. And then I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, just go to the bathroom. Just get up, go to the bathroom. I mean, even something small like that, it's just really, your brain is telling you it needs a break. So
Yeah.
give it its free, give it its freedom. Don't let the bear chase you down the hall. That's just my piece of advice today. Oh my gosh, this has been so insightful. And obviously we could talk about this a lot. We might just have to have you back for a part two, just kind of like how to tap into that and kind of some effective techniques to learn. So this has been fabulous. Again, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dear HR Diary by Manage with Heart. We'll leave Nina's connection in the show notes. Link in with her. Go check out our website. Definitely go listen to her TED Talk. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. And it gives your nice brain a little break. So take advantage of that. Until next time, all my wonderful office workplace warriors, stay fabulous.